bloody nuisance. Just need to click on that when it happens. Need to get some sort of speech going, I think, at the start, rather than having to trim this off at the start of every bloody episode.
Right. Yeah.
Here we go. All happening now. Welcome back to episode 239 of the Tall Boy Radio podcast. And as we always say, who knows where it goes when the beer flows? Well, we'll find out tonight. It's flowing nicely down the middle road. Or is it? I don't know. Is it going to be a comfortable journey or an uncomfortable one? We'll find out. But Gaza, how are you doing, first of all?
Yeah, I'm really good. Featured a little bit achy. I've been away golfing for a week, so caught up on some sunshine and hit a couple of courses up towards the northeast. So that was great. 10 of us went up and sort of had a sort of 4 or 5 days there. So nice little break. But no, all good. Looking forward to this. Like I say, missed last week's episode. So looking forward to listening to that back when it gets released. But yeah, it's always great when we have guests on. You know that I say that every time we have a guest on, it's fascinating just to listen to what their thoughts are on the particular topic. So really looking forward to this. Not sure where it's going to go. As always, a left turn or two, no doubt, along the way. But yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Indeed. And interesting enough, you mentioned last week's episode, guys, there will be a little bit of a common theme that appeared last week that may just carry through to this one. Let's find out as we follow through on that phrase. David, how are you doing?
Thanks for the excellent intro, Adam. The common theme isn't Gaz being quiet, is it? Because he wasn't there the last episode.
Unlikely.
Never going to happen.
Welcome. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to our guest, who I've known for a little while now. And he's a bit of a pro. He's been helping me professionally with some sort of a podcasting and live streaming. So sorry that you've had to dumb down to our level, but it's going to be great to have you online.
Indeed, never a truer word has been spoken on this podcast. So, Toby, did you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about why you're joining us this evening?
Hello. There's the first bit done, and now I'll do the second bit, which is why am I here? I've known David for about a year, I think about a year through professional networking events. I think that's probably it. So yeah, I think we just get but they kind of happen every so often. So every so often we kind of see each other, talk to each other, and a couple of amazing people that David works with called Verity and Jamie as well. So all lovely people, and I like just keeping in touch with lovely people. So yeah, from that first moment, we just kept in touch, really.
Fantastic. I believe, David, am I correct in saying that we've had Jamie on the podcast in the past? Is it the same Jamie?
It's the same, Jamie, yes. And I'll have to work on Verity as well to get Verity to come on the podcast. She'd be good value as well. She does a lot of traveling, goes around. Is always on holiday, so she's probably got a thing or two to tell us.
She also does have a finger or two. I think she has the full complement of 10.
Good to know. Good to know, Verity. If you're listening, let us know if that's any different. Toby, you've still got a bit of work to do, clearly. So, Toby, we threw this out there. Dave and I have been chatting about this a little while ago. We had a chap guest on the podcast a short while back talking about motorcycles. And he got us talking a little bit about midlife crisis. And we joked earlier when we were sat there in the green room chatting beforehand. Green room makes it sound a bit more professional.
I like the sound of that.
Did you like that?
I like that.
Yeah. So
it's like the Jonathan Ross show. This is great.
It is. I can talk with a lisp if needs be. So yeah, we were talking about midlife crisis, and you know, we're at the age, we're all 51 now, where 51 isn't midlife. Midlife is a metaphor. It's not necessarily an accurate time frame. But we chucked it out. Dave put, I think, a post on LinkedIn, and I think you responded, and you've got a bit of a story to tell us, and we'll look at some of the facts bit around it as well. We always try to intersperse a few facts with some of the podcasts that we do. But did you want to give us the background of the reason why you're joining us?
Well, as you can tell, clearly I have been through my midlife crisis, and I'm well out the other side. That I look about 10 years young. Yeah, so it was a bit of a left of field one because obviously I'm 37. I haven't been through my midlife crisis yet, or like I don't think I have. My wife might say otherwise, but actually, I believe I've observed my dad go through his midlife crisis in various different guises. He's now 60. I'd like to think he's on the other side of it because if he isn't, God knows what else he's going to do. But it's interesting you start with motorbikes because I thought his midlife crisis started with a motorbike. It was, is it Tomorrow Never Dies, the James Bond film with, I think the bad guy is Elliot Carver, who is like Rupert Murdoch essentially. And there's a BMW motorcycle in that. And my dad loved it so much that he went out to get that exact bike in that exact color and drove it to work or rode it to work, however you do, whatever you do. Wow. And that was the point where I thought, oh, okay, my dad's truly lost it. He has no sense of self-awareness that he's like my dad. I haven't got a picture of him with me now, but he is nothing like James Bond. Not like James Bond on a James Bond motorcycle. It's going to look a bit weird. I can't remember how long he had it actually. It was less than 3 years.
How old was he then, Toby, when he bought that?
Oh, so he would have been, it'd have been mid-40s, early to mid-40s when he did that. And my only typical dad fashion, the only thing I remember from it is that he took me out for a ride on it and he just shouted at me the whole time I was on the motorbike. Lean! I was like, oh, literally the first and last time I've ever been a passenger on a motorcycle, and all he was shouting at me for 15 minutes going down to the post office and back was lean. Never told me which way to lean. No more articulation than that. Yeah, and I think that's the moment I thought he was having a midlife crisis, but turns out that's just indicative of my dad and just more of like how he approaches life, that he sees something and he likes it and he'll go and try it, and he's done this loads of different times, but I don't think that actually, well, I'm pretty certain that wasn't his midlife crisis. That was just a blip.
Well, it's funny enough, so the episode that we're referring to, we called it, I think, every midlife crisis should involve a Harley Davidson, which is what the guy said. And to be fair, I don't know whether he'd had a midlife crisis or not. He certainly didn't mention one while he was on the episode, but he certainly enjoyed his motorbikes, and he mentioned a few. I have to say, you obviously are aware of the motorbike that you're talking about. No, I'm not a bike guy. I'm not particularly familiar with them. I'm not a Bond guy either, to be honest with you. So I'm not hugely familiar with those, but I will Google it afterwards and find out. So yeah, that isn't in itself, though. When I've been looking into this, motorbikes do play a large part, in midlife crisis, and not just motorbikes in general, but expensive hobbies. Often, you know what I mean. Often you jump into, I don't know. I started this podcast 4 or 5 years ago. That could be deemed one because it certainly cost me a penny or two in the meantime. So what else has he? What was the midlife crisis? When did you first start seeing signs of it?
It was round about the time of the financial crash of 2006. And there was a few hobbies that led up to that point. We'll probably explore those a little bit later. But I just saw my dad slowly unravel. Now, at the time he was, and kind of to some extent still is, was in the hospitality industry, and owner of about 6 different pubs of different means in Lincolnshire. And of course, the big financial crash had a huge impact on the pub trade. And not only do I think that, I think the timing of it was pretty horrendous for anybody, but also for someone who's approaching, their 40s and 50s, or is in their 40s and 50s. I think it had a deep, deep effect on him, probably way more than like the average, what I imagine the average midlife crisis, whatever that may be. That it essentially just had a really shit couple of years, really shit. But the person he is now today, as a result, after all of that heartache, trauma, stress, which as a teenager and kind of early 20s, I was completely naive to be completely honest. I only reflect on it now and go, shit, stuff was going down that I really wasn't aware of because barely an adult, so not really aware of how this could have a fundamental impact on someone. But the person he's become since it's not night and day, but it's pretty close to the way he approaches his life, what he does, his relationships with his children, his wife. All those things have shifted in a very different direction. And so whether it's the recession, the midlife crisis, or a mixture of both, I think what comes out the side of it is someone who was doing a lot of soul searching at that time, and what got spat out the other end was someone who now does something completely different, but as a result of like one of these many hobbies, that hobby, one of them, sorry, is now his career, is his job, is his business.
Yeah.
He still does a bit of hospitality stuff on the side, but more in the legal licensing type stuff rather than owning pubs and that. But yeah, I see through the three different phases of my dad. The one I knew growing up, the one who I didn't really know while he was going through that period, and the one after, who, you know, is, like I say, very, very different to how he was before.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So, I mean, I guess, you know, like I say, it's almost like a rite of passage, as you say there, that maybe it's something that we all need to go through. Or do we need to go through it, Gaz? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, you talk to lots of people, friends and acquaintances, and oh, you know, midlife crisis, and he went out and he bought this, or he went out and he did this, or and it's, as you said, it's potentially always like hobby based. So went out and spent shitloads of money on a car or a bike or whatever, you know, fast cars, fast women, and everything else in between, sort of thing, you know. So it's sort of hobby based. I mean, did my dad go through one? Don't know. If he did, I was oblivious to it. So I suppose a bit like yourself, Toby, maybe, you know, you just weren't aware of that. Maybe other people will go, yeah, he definitely did. And did you know about it? No. Did you recognize it? Don't know. On reflection, was it a midlife crisis? Did he just have a change of direction in thought process? Well, whatever it may be. Does everybody go through one? I mean, it would be hard to define what one is, I suppose, is if, you know, is it just a culmination of not maybe self-reflecting on where you are at your time in life and going, that's not what I aspire to be, and therefore I'm going to change, and therefore people see that change and go, oh, midlife crisis. I don't know, I suppose. Can a midlife crisis come earlier than that? If you make the change earlier, what would that be? A career change or whatever it may be? I don't know is a simple answer, I suppose.
But typically people will, you know, and it's not the same for everybody, but typically people will experience a midlife crisis between the ages of 35 and 50. And does everybody go through it? No. The simple answer is they don't. However, it comes from a dissatisfaction with life. And it comes from that realization. And I shared a story on Instagram earlier. So if you follow us on Instagram, or if you don't, Tallboy Radio Podcast on Instagram, and have a look at the story I shared, because there's this idea that life is short. And let's face it, life is very, very short. And there's going to come a point where you start to look at your life and understand that there's far more of it behind you than there is in front of you. And then there becomes a level of dissatisfaction. And it's not to say that you haven't achieved wonderful things. Toby's dad might have done some fantastic things, and maybe we'll hear of those shortly in his life, and certainly had sounds like an interesting career there. But, you know, you stop looking at the things that you've achieved and start looking at the things that you haven't, and understand that life is short. My body is wearing out slowly but surely, and there's very little time left to achieve them. And when I started looking into this, when we did the previous episode, and I became fascinated by it, to be honest with you, because it's something that's been leveled at me in the past, actually. People thought I had a midlife crisis around about the age of 32. I left my wife about 4 weeks after I married her, and, you know, and I moved on, and a short while later, I got with somebody who was 13 years younger than me. So I was 32, she was 19, and everybody thought, hello, midlife crisis. It wasn't. It was just what I wanted to do in life. I'm ultimately happy out of it. I've come out the other side. Bad news for the wife. That means my midlife crisis is yet to come, you know, and let's see what that intakes. But not every midlife crisis involves a sexual affair or meeting another member of the opposite or the same sex. Whatever floats your boat, we ain't got no issues with that. That isn't really the issue. It's that dissatisfaction with life. Did did he ever express that to you, Toby, or was it something he internalized, or I don't know?
To me, certainly internalized, and I think to my three brothers and sister, I don't think they'll have had an open conversation as well. I know for certain his wife, for sure, will have had that conversation. Would have been very, very close to it. And all of that stuff kind of came to me through her rather than through him directly. So my awareness of it came through his wife rather than anyone else. So yeah, that's kind of weird. Again, reflecting on that even now I still haven't really talked about that.
No, interesting.
And Toby, I'll ask this to you and then bounce it to Adam, I guess, if Adam's done research, which I haven't, and Gaz certainly hasn't because he never does. But with the midlife crisis in your dad's case, was it a mental health type thing, or was it just a more like how Adam just portrayed it, which I want to do something different, I want to do something different? So it wasn't particularly tied to depression or anything like that. It was just a series of new things.
Yeah, so it was a series of new things punctuated by quite a traumatic, business moment that caused mental health, problems with his mental health, which he then sought recovery for. And then, like I say, at the other end of that period of instability is probably not the right word, but the period of flux where things weren't stable. At home, incredibly stable, but obviously the work impacts the home life. Can you pay bills, all that kind of stuff. So this period of instability and indecision, and all that kind of stuff. I think it probably just doubled down on what would have normally just been a midlife crisis, but it kind of compounded some of the thoughts and feelings you go through. And it's interesting because when David said about midlife crisis, the first thing I thought about was my dad on the motorbike.
Yeah.
And I think kind of sitcoms, particularly in like the late 70s, 80s and 90s, have built the image of what The Fast Show is a classic example, has built this example of what a midlife crisis actually looks like through sitcoms. Whether actually it's like, finding someone who's 13 years younger, finding a sports car, a motorbike, whatever it is, like all of those things have been kind of built up in sitcoms and comedic tropes rather than actually lived experiences. So I think you then kind of you kind of look one way thinking, oh, that's the midlife crisis. But actually you look the other way and it's actually a lot more, it's a lot deeper when you think about the purpose of stuff. And I'm waffling on, but the thing with my dad particularly, he left school and went straight to work for his dad, who's a first generation Indonesian over here in the UK, set up kind of in the leisure and hospitality industry on the East Coast. And so therefore my dad's whole working life, and probably even before his working life when he was at school, was all kind of designed for him already. Like, that's what you're going to do. You'll run the family business. You'll do the family business. And it's only at that point, it was like, I don't think he ever actually thought about or was given the opportunity to think about, well, actually, do I actually want to do that? And I think that's, regardless if you part of a family business or not, I think a lot of people accidentally sleepwalk into that world of work and do something that they never set out to do, and then sit there 15, 20 years later and go, how did I get here?
Yeah, dude, that's not an unusual story, I don't think, to be honest with you. And like you say, certainly where there's a family business, that his life was mapped out for him, whether he liked it or not. That was probably always planned out for him to go down that route. So you can almost see, the cement being laid for that path that would take him down that journey to that midlife crisis. But Dave, to answer your question, actually, interestingly enough, it's really important to recognize that a midlife crisis isn't even, and it's not recognized because it isn't a mental episode. It's nothing to do with mental health, and it's nothing to do with a mental breakdown either. There's a distinct barrier between the two. That's not to say that the effects of the midlife crisis can't lead to something. And actually, it's quite common that once you experience that, you start to feel that funk, that depression with life, that's exactly the route you go down. You hit that level of depression. And, it's commonly associated that, you're so dissatisfied with life and the route that you found yourself on, that you become depressed, and you do perhaps need to seek, mental health advice on that one. Just out of interest, Toby, then, when you saw your dad experiencing the things that he experienced, and you're probably reflecting on it now. First of all, fantastic that he seems to have come out the other side. But is it in the back of your mind that it's something that you too could experience?
Yeah, almost daily. Almost daily, I think about it. Because out of all three of my brothers and sister, everybody's like, "Oh, you're most like your dad," like that, which is like great. You remember that? Do you remember that time in the late noughties where he lost his mind? Is that what I'm heading for? And so I do consciously think, actually, every little thing I do, every mannerism I have is like, okay, I am on this path. Not that I have to carry on walking down it, but at least I've had this vision into the future that I can then somehow control it, hopefully, but also talk about it with the right people, which invariably, like my dad did, will be my wife. That will be the person I talked about it. I sit here now, won't talk about it with anyone else. I'll have, I've got 2 kids. They'll be older than they are today because that's how time works. But the fact of the matter is that, to socialize what's going on is really important, probably beyond just your nearest and dearest, your friends, your extended family, and anyone who listen, because what invariably happens is very, very rarely does someone ask if you're are you okay, how you feeling, or that in this day and age that happens on a very rare basis, unless you're very close with lots of people, which I'm not traditionally. So I think, and neither was my dad. So it's like, okay, there is this pattern that I have seen him go through and go, what can I do to not break it, but at least acknowledge it and maybe try some different tactics so it isn't as bad. Now, like I say, I think the recession and the business stuff was just like pouring petrol onto a fire. Like the midlife crisis was happening. But it just added, it was an accelerant that just made things and other things happen as a result.
It's just pick up on something that you just said there about, you saw it with your dad, and people say that you're very much like him, and are there things that you can do to recognize when that's going to happen and maybe change that? I mean, does that mean that all midlife crises are bad? Does that mean that they come on the back of negative experiences? Can you, and I don't know, can you be perfectly happy, perfectly content with what it is that you have in your life, but then still be quite impulsive, which other people maybe would perceive to be a midlife crisis? You go out and you buy this, or you go and buy that, and it's not that it's a midlife crisis, because you might be fantastic family life, fantastic career, fantastic family network, fantastic support network, extended friends, etc., 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 and it's just something that you just want to do.
It's interesting because the word you use there is probably key to it all, and that is impulsive. Now, it's not necessarily impulsive because it becomes important to you. So it appears impulsive because you start engaging in riskier behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key thing. But yeah, you're right on the money when you say that it is impulsive. And like we said, it's not always to do, but it can sometimes involve taking off with someone a little bit younger than yourself, but it's that finality of life. It's that dissatisfaction life. It's a struggle with identity, is how it's described. But yeah, I think you hit the money right on the head there, dude. When you use the word impulse, because that is how it's viewed, and in many ways that is what we see.
You hear some people and they'll say, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, and I wanted to go and do the things that I want to do, and if that means going out and buying this, doing this, experiencing this, whatever that may be, it's that. And look, we probably all here will be like, we're going to make sure that we look after our families and make sure that things are in place, that when we do go, our families are supported and this, that, and the other. But in addition to that, ultimately, you sort of can't take it with you. So therefore, do the things that you want to do. Now, time is precious, and I am here for a good time, not a long time. And assuming that my family will be safeguarded in the future and financially okay, if you do have anything extra, you can't take that. it's not like the Egyptian days where, you know, they bury you with all your gold type thing. You know what I mean? It's like you're here for a good time, not a long time. So therefore, do you go and do the things that you want to do? So would that be perceived as, it might be impulsive, it might be a buy, it might be a purchase? Would that be perceived as a midlife crisis, even though the word crisis, you're not in crisis and you're absolutely exactly where you be and you're in the lane that you want to be on? It's just an impulsive purchase or an impulsive decision.
No, amen to that, dude. And I think there's a little bit of it. There's definitely a little bit of it where all of a sudden you're at a life, where, you know, a point in life, sorry, where you realize actually I can afford things,
Yeah,
and I am going to spend
and
my
is that a
money on
midlife
that.
crisis? So if you
Not
are a point
necessarily.
where you can do that and you can
Yeah,
do
no.
those things, and I don't know, Toby, I don't know what your thoughts are, David, I don't know what your thoughts are, but if you are to the point where financially quite secure, and look, you know, unless those magic numbers come in and you're mega rich or whatever, you know, you will never get to a point where you think, oh my God, I'm fantastically financially supportive so that my kids don't ever have to work again or whatever. But, you know, you get to a position where you think we are actually financially stable. We can afford the things that we enjoy. We have a quality of life that is of a particular level, of a particular standard. We have certain cars, we go on certain holidays, etc., etc. And then anything above that, it's like, well, excuse my French, fuck it. I'll just go and buy that, or I'll just go and buy that because that's what I want to do. Now, would that be a midlife crisis, or would that be perceived as something slightly different? I don't know.
What are you guys' thoughts?
I was going to say pretty much a similar thing to where Gaz was going with that, because me and Gaz, well, all three of us are the same age. My kids and Gaz's kids are pretty much the same age. Gaz is, I think, 1 year ahead. Adam's about 12 years behind us with his kids because he does everything a bit back to front. But so me and Gaz are going to find ourselves very soon with kids that have left home to university. And at that point, we're going to have freedoms that we perhaps didn't have before. And we're going to potentially have more money purely because we don't have kids draining our resources. So if I suddenly start to do things that I haven't done, if I take up golf, or I buy a sportier car, or I start to go on holiday 4 or 5 times a year, or I do things that I've never done before, that's probably me just thinking the kids have gone, it's my time with the wife now. But looking from the outside, I think the point Gaz was making, looking from the outside, is somebody going to say, you know what, I think David's having a midlife crisis here.
Yeah, he's doing this and he's doing this and he's doing this, and he never used to do that, and now look at him, he's off here gallivanting here, and he's doing, and it's not. And I suppose the word is crisis, and you're absolutely not in crisis. You just are position in your life where you can afford and you are comfortable and able to do the things that maybe you've previously put on the back burner because of your family or whatever it may be. And that word crisis, you know, I don't think I'm in crisis. But, you know, I make a decision, although people may disagree.
It's starting to sound like another intervention episode.
But, you know, but you get to a point where you're very much like, you know, we're relatively comfortable. You know, we have a nice house, we have nice things. You know, my kids, as similar to Dave, you know, one's away at uni, one's going through A levels now. So they'll get to a point where in 2-3 years' time, they both will have sort of flown the nest, they'll have their own families, and assuming that they are relatively financially secure, you will have the ability and the time to do some things that other people go, wow. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to buy a Harley Davidson and ride off into the sunset sort of thing, but if I did that, people would go, oh my God, what's up with Gaz?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we need to focus on here is, you know, there's a difference between having the adult money to spend on adult stuff rather than on your kids. And, you know, I'm still in that position where I have to spend it on my kids. And yes, I do like to do some nice. Listen, I don't have a bad life. I don't have a bad life before it starts to sound like I'm moaning about stuff, because I'm not. Okay. But there's a difference between that and that identity crisis, that focus in your life changing from being actually, you know, you like you say, you've just been away golfing. You do okay. You do okay.
Yeah, better.
It would be very difficult to spot if you started spending money on other stuff, because you do okay. So it's going to be after something spectacular to be called a midlife crisis. So, you know, there's a real difference between that and that focus on the finality of life. And before we get to Toby and we get his take on this and see if he can tell the difference, or if we could spot the difference with, you know, in his situation, let's just say hello to Paul Kelly, who's saying, going on by how the world is getting, what qualifies as midlife, 20 to 30. Paul, let's not focus on that. Let's not bring us down. We're 51. Well, I don't want to be in a, you know, 2/3 of the way through life crisis. That's the worst situation I could be in right now. And yes, we will get you back on a podcast soon. It's been a while. Yeah, and yes, we are doing well. Gaz, as you can hear, doing rather better than most of us. So, so Toby, tell us from your experience then, from looking at that. You've heard what Dave said. You've heard what Gazzy said. Did you perceive a difference within, rather than your dad just, actually, fuck it, I've got a bit of money, I'm going to do what I want to do, and no, I'm struggling with who I am. Yes, I've been through this awful, awful experience of the financial crash, which affected people in many, many different ways, obviously financially being one of them, but then that carries on to other different parts of your life. Did you see a difference, rather than just some guys just thinking, you know what, I'm just going to spend a bit of the money that I have earned?
Well, and this is the thing. My dad has always had hobbies, hobbies that don't necessarily, you wouldn't look at him and go, oh, that's a hobby that he would do. I think the very first thing I remember is he loved games consoles. And at that time I was like, it was the very first Mega Drive that I would play with my dad. But as I still play games consoles, he moved on from that very quickly. And then all of a sudden, in the corner of the room appeared a drum kit. You're like, okay, but this guy hasn't even hit 40 by this point. But he's gone out and splurged on a drum kit. And then we kind of get to the motorbike phase, and then power kiting came into it. So I don't know if you've done power kiting before.
Okay.
But it's essentially a big kite that pulls you along. So you had a buggy, get on the beach, sit in the buggy, get the kite to pull you along the beach. Speed cups was another one. Speed stacks. I don't know if I'm getting some blank expressions.
I've seen it on YouTube.
Yeah. So you know, he doesn't even remember this hobby either, which is really interesting, because I have the cup still, and like the world record time and stuff. So he had that, the power kite, and then it got into drones. When drones were like being sold in, you know, Curry's and PC World and all those kind of places. And I think that hobby came at the midlife crisis moment. So it just so happened that at that point, the entrepreneurial spirit that my dad has went, okay, cool, I'm going to turn that into a business. Like, I enjoy doing this. Why wouldn't I if I enjoy doing this, why wouldn't I just try and find a way to get paid to do this? That would make way more sense in my life. He never did that with drumming. You know, even though he's a massive Phil Collins fan, he ain't never going to be Phil Collins. I could never see him doing power kiting at the Olympics. I mean, I just couldn't see it. Games consoles, we're only just seeing the monetization of that, so he couldn't do that. So I think he was on this journey to find a hobby that could eventually help him live the life he wants to live. So now he makes his money by flying drones and filming people like Guy Martin, Ben Stokes, loads of. I'm going to cough. Sorry,
that's fine.
It's allowed.
So he's been all over, like, doing all this stuff as a result of this midlife crisis, which was like, he just had a room full of drones at one point, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, it's going to be my new business, and lo and behold, it's his business now. That's what he does. And like, yeah, but you used to like run and manage pubs. What's drones got to do with it? Like, was that your midlife crisis? But I think to your guys' point is, you are just at whenever it happens in your life, trying to find that moment where you can spend the rest of your life, or a large portion of it, because work is a large portion of it, right? Doing something that you enjoy. Because why wouldn't you do something that, you know, was the family business that you didn't really have any decision in? Why not go and do something like drone filming, you know?
Yeah.
So taking that sort of analogy, you know, I'm quite an avid golfer, and I play quite a lot, really enjoy it. It's a massive hobby of mine. I suppose what you're saying is then if I felt, you know, at some point, so I jack in my job and I go, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jack in my job and I'm going to try and go and play on the seniors tour or whatever. And I spend all my effort on, and people are going, Gaz, what are you doing? You'll never be good enough for that. You'll never get to that point. And I'm like, no, but it's a hobby, man. I want to make money of it. I suppose at that point, people are going, Gaz, is everything okay? Because I've just jacked in all the security and they start changing direction.
But I think, and that's the problem with a sporting midlife crisis, is that it's probably come to, in the nicest possible way, it's probably come too late.
Absolutely.
You know, when I watch Formula One, like my dream was always to be a Formula One driver. I now sit here as a 37-year-old going, you know what? It probably isn't going to happen. And having that realization. So the ability to dream up like what you might do seems to just happen later in life. Like whether it's the education system, whether it's employers or whoever it is, right? Kind of say, okay, this is a lane, go in this lane and stick to it. You know, I went to university to do radio production because I wanted to be a radio DJ. That didn't happen. I mean, this is literally the closest I've got to it. Now, I'm almost like 20 years down the line from going to university. And Mum, I finally made it. I'm almost a radio DJ. So maybe that's my midlife crisis. Maybe, but genuinely, my midlife crisis might be I might just go and try and be a radio DJ because that's what I wanted to do when I was 18.
Yeah.
I just need to. Sorry, Adam, I just need to take a left turn here, Gaz. Is there money to be made on the seniors golf tour then?
Yeah, loads. If you get to a certain, obviously, if you get to a certain standard, and yes, there is, and it's not quite like it was 30 years ago where the seniors there was like 10 bob available for an event. Yes, there is serious money to be made by doing that, and it's I think it's over 55. I think is your class as a senior, so 4 years time type thing. Woo, here we go. So but yeah, there is money. Again, it's levels. It's a bit like football, I suppose. If you get to the Premier League, there's absolutely shitloads of money. Whereas if you're playing in the conference, there's probably not that much. And can you sustain a family full time if you're earning conference football money? Probably not. So therefore, you need to do something else. But if you get to a certain level, 100%, it is financially a viable option.
You see, because that wouldn't surprise me if you said I'm aiming for 55 to go and try and get onto the seniors tour. The second kid would have just about finished university, pretty much.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't surprise me. Oh, that'd be good on you guys. I think that's a cracking idea. Go for it.
Well, yeah, but there'd be loads of people that go like, well, that would mean that you've got to give up. I'm in education, so you've got to give up your day-to-day job. You've got to go and dedicate yourself, and people will be looking at you and guys, what are you doing? There's no financial security attached to that because you might be shit type thing. You know what I mean? So therefore, you can't then do the things that you want to do.
I'm with Dave on this one, okay, guys. I think this is a little bit different because, to be fair, and Toby, to put it into context for you, Gaz is actually a very, very good golfer. And I'm not saying he could go professional but on a senior tour, I genuinely think he'd probably do okay. And this is the thing where it would be a midlife crisis if he's like, yeah, do you know what? I'm going to go back. I gave up table tennis too soon. I might go.
Yeah, that county table tennis that I did like 40 years ago, whatever.
That would be.
I'm going to go back and do that.
That will be where people started talking. To be honest, I'm okay. If you took it up to golf, I'm being slightly surprised. I wouldn't even turn it. I wouldn't even blink an eye to it.
How good at golf are we talking?
So, well, I'm currently off scratch, so I've got a scratch handicap. So I do okay. I have been a plus golfer, but I'm 51 now, so these young whippersnappers that hit the ball like miles way further than me, sort of thing. But I do okay. So I'm a scratch golfer. The problem is that, for every one of me, there's another 10 of me at the next club, the next club, the next club. It's such a saturated market that there's so many good players around that actually there's no real guarantee that you would ever be able to get anywhere really, other than and I'm not saying I'm going to, by the way, unless I get a midlife crisis, but unless you dedicate yourself to it, and therefore that becomes your job, and your job is to get better at that sport, and therefore you dedicate yourself to that sport, which would mean then giving up the day job and doing X, Y, and Z. So I do okay. I'm pretty decent. I'm a good golfer. Am I good enough? Probably not now as it stands. If I was to jack it all in and go and concentrate and play full time, would I be? Don't know. Is a simple. I think if somebody said to me, "Here's some sprinkle magic dust. If you do this, this, and this, you definitely will be good enough." I'll be like, "Woohoo! Right, let's go and do it." But obviously, there's no guarantees in life, so
I'm with the other two. Just give it a go. For everything you've told me is like, yeah. Well, if two other people are backing you already, then you've got 4. You've got 4 years. You've got 4 years before
the plan in place.
Yeah,
the real question we have to ask him is: okay, would you be any better if you hadn't broken your collarbone showing off to a bunch of kids jumping a BMX over a ramp?
Well, that might have been the midlife crisis right there.
That's my point.
Actually, and this is going to sound ironically, I'm probably actually betting now for breaking my collarbone just because it's stupid. I'm not going to get into the biomechanics and all of that, but because I didn't then play golf for a period of time and I was trying to strengthen my collarbone and all my shoulder muscles around it, I actually have managed to hit the ball a little bit further than I used to, so it might have actually been a good thing.
Unbelievable.
I didn't find any advantages from when my collarbone was broke, guys.
Oh, here we go.
How did you do that, Dave?
Yeah.
Somebody tripped me up and slammed me into a concrete floor, didn't they, Gaz?
That's not quite how it worked, Dave. We were playing Bulldog or whatever the free, and Dave tagged me, turned round, ran away. I ran after him. Our legs got tangled. Dave fell over, broke his collarbone. That was actually what happened.
Exactly.
And so you were playing Bulldog, so this was about a year ago, was it?
Absolutely. Yeah, after a drunken night out, we went, yeah. That's how it happened, wasn't it, Dave? That's my recollection.
Yeah, exactly. You were chasing me and you clipped my heels and sent me flying.
Oh, come on.
And
It definitely would have gone to VAR, put it like that. Was it intentional or not? It definitely would have gone to VAR.
I've never suggested it was intentional, but now you've raised it, it's just got me thinking.
I can absolutely guarantee now it definitely was not intentional. And that's about as much as you'll get from me, Dave.
The thing about my collarbone, Toby, not only was it broken intentionally or not by Gaz, my first PE lesson back, we had some Canadian students over playing baseball, and I was going to catch the ball. I'd shouted for it, and a guy called Tristan slammed into me, broke it again, and he actually lives on my street. So I can't get away from these people that broke my collarbone.
Why'd you keep these violent hooligans in your life?
I actually remember that, Dave, as well.
Thinking about it, did you tell Tristan to go get the ball?
Hey, Tristan, what would be really funny is if you go and do this.
Work the collarbone. That's where he's weakest. Run at him hard. It'll go.
But no, I think. That was a bit of a left turn when it talked about collarbones. There we go. That's how we roll here. But I think just getting back to, I think you're probably right. I think there's a difference between having the means and the ability to do the things that you want to do, and then maybe making very impulsive decisions that actually might have either personal or financial implications down the line. That not that you it's not an addiction or anything, but it's something that you make a choice and it's very impulsive, and you might live to regret making that choice potentially down the line, I suppose. And I suppose maybe that might be the little difference that we're sort of talking about.
Definitely. So if I chuck out some of the symptoms that you can spot a midlife crisis, maybe you guys can chime in, and maybe Toby can let us know if he saw any of those from his father. So first of all, one of the signs is a change in habits and routines. Did you see a difference there with him?
Yeah. So work primarily, like obsessed with work, like just would never stop working. Evenings, weekends, work. Then all of a sudden he started not working in evenings. He'd come home, have dinner, and not do work. Everything became a lot more relaxed where work was concerned, and a complete difference in the it was weird, because obviously for the first 25 30 20 years of my life, summer holidays, for example, I went to work with my dad. Fortunately for me, he worked above an amusement arcade, chipped us a couple of quid, and I got to go and play Time Crisis for a couple of days in the summer. So I'm not complaining, but I think that's testament to he was really focused on work, and as I said, the man he is now. Not saying he isn't focused on work, but he's focused on work in what I'd probably deem as more sustainable habits, rather than what was really unsustainable. And I don't know whether that is also part of it, right? That you kind of live your life to such an extent with this, the habit had been there for 20, 30 years or whatever. And then you're just like, I've had enough of this habit. I need to do something different. Like it becomes monotonous, where you're like, there's only so much monotony. I'm not saying it was monotonous work, but like of the same stuff over and over and over again, the human capacity to just handle that is going to vet. And this is where a midlife crisis probably varies, right? Because the straw that broke the camel's back will be different for everybody. and it'll happen at different times. But you're just like, I'm just bored of doing the same thing. I want to do something different.
And was that something that, so that change in work habit, was that something that was very, very noticeable to you at the time, or is that only really something that you've noticed sort of reflecting on actually your experiences as an older person, looking back at when you were a bit younger?
No, pretty noticeable at the time.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, like, because it was very visibly different.
So like, well, Dad,
like,
you're around at the weekend, you're around tonight. Oh, you normally work, type thing.
You're a bit more chill. What's going on? Like,
Yes,
this is, and then it's like, actually, no, he's just happy in himself and happy being more chill.
Right.
Which he never was before with anything, right? You know, taking his son on his motorbike, very not chill about that. Lean.
Yeah.
He taught me to drive. I mean, one of the most traumatic experiences personally for myself to watch a very highly strung mid-40s man shout at someone. It was just yeah, and I believe all siblings were dealt that same treatment. So I mean, the midlife crisis could have come a little bit earlier for us because it would have meant better driving lessons.
Just, I'll give you a story. If you want to hear about a stressful driving lesson, okay, here's one. So my stepdad, he took me out in his brand new Ford Escort one Boxing Day after they bought me 20 driving lessons, bless them, for Christmas. Great present. I had 20 lessons and didn't pass my test. That's another story. So on that Boxing Day, they took me out and said, go on, have a drive. Took me around the back of Freeport. I crashed his brand new car into a wall to the point that it did a severe amount of damage to it. I had to climb out through the window because I couldn't get out for the passenger seat. So we got back and I was white, you know what I mean? Because the language he used was choice. And to be fair,
Valid,
yeah. So I got back. My mum said, how did it go? And I said, I've crashed the car. Yeah, nice one, Adam. No, seriously, go looking to drive. Yeah, we had to, you know, for insurance purposes, we had to lie. Let's just gloss over that because I wasn't insured and I didn't have a license. But that's another matter. So some of the other things in life, then, as well, that you might have spotted. So unusual dissatisfactions with life and circumstance. We looked at that one. Sudden changes in mood and temperament. I'm guessing you experienced a little bit of that, did you?
Oh yeah, he was. Can I swear? I have already sworn, so I'm just.
Yeah, you can swear. Yeah.
He was a really grumpy fucker, like irritatingly so. Even to the point where, and obviously because I was a teenager, early 20s, would like kind of go toe to toe with the grumpiness and try and like win him round, which was, on reflection, a poor choice of tactic on my behalf because again that just added fuel to the flames. So, yeah, I think he was just grumpier and unhappier, like in a way I'd never seen before. With, you know, there's a real difference between working a lot, feeling stressed about work, but actually everything is still moving and there's momentum. Whereas on the other side, what started happening was like he just wasn't happy with it. So it was like more work didn't equal more happiness. In fact, it actually started making it worse. And I think that's the thing, right? It's like, well, this the cycle. It's the cycle. The spring gets more coiled until it just either something like a recession pings it and releases. But I imagine it just happens to everyone. It just goes ding at some point. You're like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's the Jerry Maguire moment. You just walk out and wait for Renee Zellweger, isn't it, to walk out the door with you.
And it, you know, you use it in normal life, but in education they call it sort of the Coke bottle phenomenon. So, you know, something will happen and you shake the Coke bottle a little bit, nothing happens. Something else will happen, you shake the Coke bottle a little bit, nothing happens. And then you go home or you go to work or whatever, and you take the top off, and then all of a sudden the whole thing just explodes. And I suppose it's just those little bits that, oh, well, we noticed this, or I wasn't happy with this, or I wasn't happy with this. And all of a sudden you get this real big eruption, a real big explosion of whatever it may be. And then the flip side of that is everything then becomes calm after that until the next time, and then until the next time, and the next time ad infinitum, and so on. So, you know, if people are seeing things that they're doing repeatedly that is causing X, Y, or Z, it's like, well, what is it you can do, or what is it that you're going to do personally to then make sure that actually that doesn't happen, and I am on a level playing field, and I'm not being grumpy at home, and I'm not being this, and I'm not being that. And it's hard to spot in other people. It's hard to spot in yourself, but it's hard to spot in other people sometimes.
definitely hard at spotting yourself. I think, one of the things that's difficult to do is self-reflection. Unless you take the time to do that, you don't recognize those changes in yourself. But maybe when you look back, you think, yeah, I'm not the person that I was.
That's a great point. Toby, have you spoken to your dad about that then? Have you spoken to him about, did he recognize this midlife crisis within himself at the time, or is it just really on reflection?
It's on reflection, and we've had one red wine fueled conversation about it.
Right.
I think it was either the Christmas just gone or the Christmas before. Because I asked him a question, and I wasn't even trying to approach this conversation because I don't know why, just never have. But when the pandemic hit, and I asked him the question, is like, would you rather be running pubs now or in 2006?
Yeah.
Like, what would you do? And he then told me lots of stuff, but ultimately the decision was like, what was his answer? His answer was, I'd rather run pubs in the pandemic because you've got an option. The stuff you can do. In 2006, he felt completely powerless. There was nothing he could do. Everything was completely out of his control.
Right.
Whereas he had in the pandemic, you got an element of control there. You don't. In his mind, there's nothing to worry about. You can control that. You could do something. In 2006, with that recession, obviously felt completely powerless. And probably rightly so. But also, I think that's a reframing in his mind that actually, in every ever the optimist, but in every recession, there's opportunity, right? You can find it if you can find it. And he's a thoroughbred entrepreneur, so it'd be like, if there's anyone going to find it, it'd be my dad, and he couldn't. So I think that gets the Coke bottle phenomenon, right? The bottle was so shaken up that even he got to that point. It was like, I just can't see a way out of this. Yeah. When my assumption would have been, he'd have said he'd rather done the recession rather than pandemic because at least he could keep pubs open. But
wow, there you go. So other things you might see then, major changes in appearance. Did you see any of that?
No, I didn't see. Yeah, but my dad has had a storied fashion history anyway. So he once. I hope he never sees this. He once had a ponytail that was about this long. I think it was a rat tail or whatever they call it. And he's got quite straight hair like me. So it was just like a little tuft of hair that stuck out the back, and it was truly awful. Ever since he remarried, he's now found someone that can help him with fashion. So well, actually, so yes, I did see. No, I'm going to take it back. So because he owned pubs, he was very friendly with breweries, and therefore, for my whole teenage life, certainly, my dad would be wearing a brewery t-shirt, which, I mean, it's quite on trend now. Like, he was just, let's say, ahead of his time. But I'm not talking like good breweries, like Carlsberg, Tetley's, Guinness, he goes like Guinness, right? But he would wear brewery t-shirts constantly, free merch he got from suppliers. Whereas now, the only piece of like sponsored merch he wears is for the Mercedes Formula One team. That's because he loves Formula One, but also one of my brothers works for them, so he tends to get that merch, and he's quite proud of it. So there's something there that he wears that as a badge of proudness of his one of my brothers. So he doesn't wear beer merch as much. And now I'm reflecting on it. I'm just like counting how many brewery t-shirts I have in my drawer upstairs. It was my birthday last week, and he went to a golf event where there were breweries there because he still kind of networks. And instead of picking up brewery t-shirts for himself, he picked them up and sent them to me. And I rang him and went, "These are really great. This is what I want. I was going to get a brewery t-shirt. Beaver Town would be the one I'd want. Thank you." And now I'm reflecting and kind of go, okay, when we see this is quite cathartic. See the journey ahead of you, like, yeah, brewery t-shirts. I'm wearing a hell of a lot of those. Shout out to Hawkshead Brewery up in the Lake District. Great brewery. Good t-shirts.
Brilliant.
Oh dear, we're seeing a little bit into your future here now, Toby.
I'm literally unraveling right before your very eyes. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm going to have to do a whole wardrobe declutter before I go to sleep.
Fair play, fair play. Well, one of the other things, obviously, we've looked at the new and often expensive hobbies, but the other one is an increased concern about age. Again, it's probably something that he may very well have internalized. But was it something that you perceived when you look back on that experience? Do you think you could perceive that he was concerned about his age and maybe the time they had in front of him? Like we said at the start, you become aware there's more time behind you than there is in front of you. You know, so when we talk about midlife, it's the fact that you've passed past it and the time is getting increasingly smaller. Did you see any evidence of that?
I said no at the beginning of the last one. I'm going to say no now, and then I all of a sudden remember anything. But I don't think so. I think as a family, particularly, well, on my dad's side especially, we generally look a lot younger than we actually are. So while my dad's now in his 60s, this was really weird. So it's his 60th a month ago. And I forget my dad is 60 because he doesn't look 60. And all his mates walked in and went, oh, no one is 60, so it's fine. All these people walked in. I'm like, who are all these old people? Like, why are they here? And it turns out they were 60-year-old people. That's who my dad hangs out with. But he looks in the nicest possible way, like you guys, 40s and 50s.
You just said you look like a 60-year-old. Why are you celebrating?
So my body feels like a 60-year-old.
I think never had a serious conversation about it, but it always gets played off with we all look young, don't we? Blah blah blah. So not really. He's gone grey with grace. He, unlike his dad, who is constantly dyeing his hair black, and he's like knocking on the door of mid-90s, yet has only in the past 5 years stopped dyeing his hair black, and that's because I think my gran stopped buying it for him.
Fair play. To be honest, though, when he said at the start he told us your age, I thought, fuck off, you're never that old.
I just do it to get on podcasts to talk about middle age. I just say I'm 37. I'm actually 25.
Dude, I'd have said fuck off if you'd said 25.
It's good lighting. It's good lighting.
You look at and it might be, actually, it might be change of clothes. It might be like a brand new haircut. It might be that actually not disheveled as such, but you might grow a beard and you never have. Or I wonder what this looks like on me. Something. So there are certain things that are physically visible, I suppose, the way you dress, the way you look, that might indicate that actually you've got a bit of a change of direction or whatever. And that might be, again, going back to what you mentioned right at the start, indicative of maybe a new hobby or maybe, an affair or maybe, a change in personal circumstance or whatever it may be, that actually there's a physical manifestation of that in as much as you can actually see a change in somebody. We're all 51 here, most of my time is behind me and I've got relatively less ahead of me. But Dave, just a question for you. Do you, worry about age? Do you worry about getting old? I'm just obviously talking about what Adam and Toby have said there. Is that something that plays on your mind or not?
I guess not in the sense of I'm getting old, I'm going to die, because that could just happen any time to anyone. So I don't think of it in that respect, because it'd be very difficult if you did worry about dying, because it would be in your own head. It would be pretty horrible all the time. In terms of time running out to do stuff, I think yes, in the sense that it's when you get to this age, your body does start to break down. I mean, my back is problematic on and off. It's been pretty bad this weekend again, so I feel pretty wrecked. And you think there's a lot I want to do. We've talked before about when the kids leave home. Me and Catherine can go and enjoy ourselves without the kids, and hopefully in 4, 5, 6 years' time not have to worry particularly about working full time. So we're going to have the time to do that. And then I do think, what, is it all going to be a bit late? And then if you do drop dead, it's definitely too late, either of us, or we get ill to the point where we can't do stuff. So do I worry about it? No. Do I think about it in the sense that, have I got this the right way around in life? Have I worked too much for too long and not spent enough time doing more enjoyable things? That crosses my mind. And I suppose I'll never have the answer to that until the future. If I get to 80 and the age of 55 to 80 was spent just doing stuff and enjoying stuff, I'll say, no, you know what, I did that the right way around. If I find myself infirm or me or Catherine dead in the next few years, then I'll think, no, I definitely screwed that up.
Yeah. And it's strange just because, obviously my wife's a GP, so she sees it all the time in terms of people that, we save for a rainy day, and we save, and actually that rainy day never arrives because they get that awful news that they're terminally ill or something happens or a life tragedy. And you just think, life's for living. And initially I probably didn't think that, but I do now. And it's like, what, the more experiences that you can do now. And I joked earlier about, we're here for a good time, not a long time, but we are, we're not here for a significant, so just go. Look, my philosophy very much is go and do the things that you can do and go and enjoy and experience all the things that you can enjoy and experience with the time that you've got. And that doesn't mean that you're going to detract from anything that with your kids and stuff. But as you said, Dave, I genuinely am okay with sort of getting old. I don't worry about it at all. But other people do, don't they? And it's that when you get to that midlife bit and they worry about, oh my God, what am I going to do next? What's my next bit of my life? What does that look like? And I suppose that's the real difficulty with some people, I suppose.
Yeah, it is.
Is that a difference between like fulfillment, essentially fulfillment, and then like if you're more fulfilled, which David, you sounds like you might be slightly more fulfilled, like that there's no regrets with what I've done at the moment because actually I've spent my time wisely. Is there an element that you get to a stage in life and you kind of go, you reflect back and go, did I actually waste some? Should I have done that? Should I have been a GP? Did I enjoy it? Should I have done something else? And I suppose is that the tipping point of a midlife crisis when you kind of go, you are self-reflecting about your time past rather than your future time, I guess.
I think there's with me personally, when it comes to regrets, I'm pretty relaxed in that I probably only have one regret, which I won't share, but I tend to make decisions that are right at the time. And in my mind, if I make the decision that's right at the time, I never regret that. I just don't, because it was the right decision at the time. Irrespective of whether it turns out to have been the right decision, I wouldn't regret it as long as I'm comfortable it was right at the time. And I think that's pretty much where I am. So although I do think that I may get it wrong if I do, be infirm or dead in the next few years, if I'm dead, it wouldn't really matter. But if I was alive but not able to do anything, I wouldn't regret my choices this far because they were all right at the time.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When I look at my life, I've not regretted a single thing that I've done. The only regrets you should ever have, and I would say this to everybody, only regret the things you haven't done. Don't regret anything you've done because it's a learning experience. Even if it didn't turn out the way you planned, guess what? You learn from it. And as we always say, it's a first attempt in learning. It's failing.
Fail is a first attempt in learning. And as Dave hit the nail on the head. As long as you're making decisions at the time that at that time were informed, and you make a decision based on everything that you have available to you, if that then subsequently 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 2 months, a year, 2 years later turns out to be actually, it wasn't the wrong decision. It just didn't turn out the way you expected it to. No. And it was, so at the time, it wasn't the wrong decision. And lots of people will view that as, oh, that's a wrong decision. Well, it wasn't, because at the time you made it with all the information that was readily available to you. So at the time, it was the right decision to make. It just so happens that because of circumstance or environment or whatever it may be, down the line, it transpired that the outcome wasn't quite what you expected the outcome to be, and therefore you made another decision. So I'm with you, Dave. 100%. I'm with you.
Indeed. And I want to chuck a few things out there before we close out. I know we're around about the hour mark. We're going to run a little bit over tonight, and I apologize for that. But always good stuff and always valuable. And I'll be dead honest. When I first started looking into this, it set me on a journey. And it set me thinking about stuff. And it set me thinking about what I have achieved in life and what I want to achieve in life. And it could very, very easily have taken me down that route into a midlife crisis when I started to reflect on what I've achieved and what I want to achieve and the time that I have left to achieve it. Now, certainly career-wise, anybody who knows me knows I'm very, very relaxed about that kind of stuff. It doesn't concern me at all in terms of where I am. I'm quite comfortable with that. You know, the fact that my wife earns about double what I do, it works out a little bit nicely for me as well. It means I can swan around doing very little while she earns the money. That's by the by. That's just good fortune how it's happened. Money, not that important to me as it just so happens. But some of the things that I need to share with you before we close out today, okay, is in terms of a midlife crisis can last anywhere between 6 months and 10 years, okay? You know, this dissatisfaction with life can last up to 10 years. And that's really, really important to take into account. One of the things that I said that carries over from the last podcast that we did with Stephen, and he mentioned it very late on, and he's very kindly sending us out some jars. And it's the one thing that you can use to battle or that will fend off a midlife crisis. And it's the one thing that gave me comfort that I will probably not face one, or I am not facing one right now as we speak, and that's gratitude. Okay, so Stephen spoke about gratitude. He's sending us out some jars. We can write down our thoughts of gratitude and put them into the jar. We're doing a New Year's special. And we're going to be sharing some of those thoughts with you that we've shared our gratitude. But if you are grateful, if you maintain a grateful approach, and Toby, I need to say at this point, so I'm not suggesting for 1 second that your dad wasn't grateful for the things that he'd achieved in his life, but this is one of the things that is touched on when you look into midlife crisis, that gratitude is really, really important. Now, one of the things I've always said, I'm incredibly, incredibly grateful for all the things in my life. I'm incredibly grateful for the position I'm in. And, you know, we're not going to get into the points whether we feel like it's deserved or it isn't deserved, because, you know, I've felt sometimes fortunate beyond what I deserve in life. But gratitude is incredibly, incredibly important. So it's something that we really, really need to keep in mind. So reflecting on that then, Toby, you said your dad's come through it and he's a changed person from his experiences. Do you see a gratitude in him for his experience that he's had and now his reflection on life? Difficult question, I appreciate.
Yeah, save the big one till last. Yes, I think he's way more great. Like that's but like he's outwardly more grateful for the things around him. Yeah. Children, grandchildren, dogs. He's got 2 dogs. I never saw him having dogs, but he's incredibly grateful for his dogs, his wife, his house, his career, like everything. I see a more someone who acknowledges what they have more than they probably did. But I think before it's because he didn't stop to acknowledge everything that he'd achieved, and would be a bit of a problem solver. What's the next thing that needs fixing? What's the next thing that needs doing? And so never allowed himself the time to stop and reflect. And I think, when you're thinking about what does the next part of life look like, I think that was the moment he stopped and reflected, but now continually does that, and way more in tune with it than he ever did when I was growing up, I think. So for the better, right? For the better, it's just a happier person, a happier and more available person to be around is how I describe it.
You see, I would suggest that at this point, the Ferris Bueller quote was, if you say, don't stop and look around every once in a while, you might miss it. Sort of,
moves pretty fast. If you don't
stop and look pretty fast, don't stop and look around every once in a while, you might miss it, sort of thing. So that that's a great sort of quote line. Life does move pretty fast, and actually, if you don't at various points just take a step back and reflect on what you've done and what that might mean and the impact that you might have or it has on you, you might just miss it. Sort of thing. So that and when you were talking, then you teed up the question. I'm like, that's the great quote, isn't it? And I apologize if I misquoted it. Adam corrected me. So, but no, and that's it. And it is important that you do reflect on what you've done, and you do reflect on the journey that you've gone through. But you do throw your mind forward, think, well, there are still some things that I want to achieve. But in achieving those things, just take a step back, because actually, if you don't, it might just pass you by and you don't really reflect on the things that you are grateful for and things that have happened to you.
100%. One of the things that we need to finish on as well is that midlife crisis comes to a close when you then start to feel comfortable again. I feel comfortable that we're at the point where we can bring this episode to a close, not just because me and Gaz are in a relatively small study, and my absolute fear of insects means I refuse to keep any windows open in my house, and we're pretty much hot boxing it right here, right now. So we need to go outside and just basically get rid of some of the sweat that we are producing. It's a very manly scent in this study right now. So we're going to bring it to a close right now. But Toby, give us your final thoughts. Give us your final thoughts on this matter.
The second biggest one till last.
Yeah.
I think it's the element of conversation about any of it. I think that's the thing I reflect on, that whilst I may have observed some of it and internalized a lot of what I've just told you now, and I said to David, like, I've never really talked to anyone about any of what I've just said here. But when I saw that LinkedIn post, I was kind of drawn to it. It's like, yeah, I should talk about this. Probably with my dad rather than with you. So there we go. I'll just send him a link to this and go, Dad, watch this. If you watch it on double speed, it'll take you half an hour. But it's the element of talking about it that I think I go back to the thing I think I said near the beginning, the stigma that kind of the sitcom and sketch show kind of created around the farce of what a midlife crisis isn't it. And if you decide to go on the seniors golf tour, if you decide to do anything else, there's a reason and an acknowledgement that you are a person going through thoughts and feelings at a certain moment. Call it a midlife crisis, call it whatever you want. But if you talk about it, you remove the stigma from it, but B, you probably find there is some well-founded logic behind all of those decisions. No one randomly just goes, oh, you know what? I watched James Bond the other day. I'm just going to go buy the James Bond motorbike because why not?
Yeah. Absolutely. Dave, make some sense of it all.
No, I can't. No, I think it's been very interesting actually, and to see it from Toby's perspective as a child of somebody that's been through that is, I think, interesting, because it gives a different reflection on how you could see that unraveling in front of your eyes. For me, listening to some of the things that have been said and how you can identify whether you're going through a midlife crisis, I think it's quite useful. And I don't think it's always necessarily bad either. And I think that talking about it, which Toby mentioned a while back, and it's just summarized, is the key, because particularly if you're in a relationship or you have children that are still dependent on you, you can go through these things, you can talk about it, and it could be an opportunity to try things and do different things and to learn and have new adventures without actually just, crashing your family. It doesn't have to be, crisis is by the very word, it suggests that it's bad. But I don't think it necessarily has to be from what we've talked about tonight. I think it's just a period of change and a period of opportunity as much as a crisis. So talk about it and let the stuff out there, embrace it and do it with your family and go through that period in your life and come out better the other side, like Toby's dad has.
Indeed. And like you say, we've covered, and although this isn't necessarily a mental health issue, we've talked about this in the past, Dave, you and I, and we've covered many issues on this. And one of the key things is that men are terrible at talking about what's going through their minds and what's affected them. And as Toby's said there a couple of times, and Dave just reiterated, really, really important is to talk about what's on your mind with your friends, with your cohorts, or with a professional. Gary, give us your final thoughts.
Well, that must be important. You said Gary, not Gaz. Wow. Blimey. I'm in trouble now. I'm on the naughty step. Look, Toby, it's been amazing to have you on. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for giving up your time talking about it. And it's strange because we never really sort of said whether or not myself, Adam, Dave, sort of parents have gone through a midlife crisis. And I suppose, in a way, the premise of the episode has always been that it's the males that have gone through the midlife crisis, because we've spoken a lot about dads and what dad thinks and what dad did and what dad felt and how did dad speak. But I suppose in a way, mums can do exactly the same thing. So, and it's interesting that we all of a sudden just assumed it would be the dad as such that goes, just because again the motorbike and Toby's dad analysis as such. So, but yeah, I love talking about things that really mean something to our guest and is a personal touch. We haven't spoken about has your dad, has my dad actually gone through it, and what are the things that we've experienced going through, and can we relate to some of the things that Toby's gone through with his dad, sort of thing. So fascinating episode, absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. Toby, again, just thank you very much for your time. It's been amazing just to listen to your thoughts and how you felt during the time and how you've now subsequently reflected upon that. So again, big thank you from us here at TBR HQ as such, and we look forward to the next time.
Indeed, yeah, it's an interesting one. We do focus on the male. It does happen to the female, but it's a predominantly male.
It is a predominantly male thing.
It's a predominantly male thing, and that's and I think the fact that you got 4 dudes talking about it tonight and how it's affected one guy, definitely. I think that's the area we should be focusing on, because it's the big area we can have a full, an impact on. So if you are affected by any of the issues tonight, if you do think you're having a midlife crisis, the advice is to go and call 111, call that number, and just take some advice on it, because there are people there who are professionals and can help you. If you're listening to this episode and it's made a difference to you, then God bless you. God bless you. I hope it makes, I hope it helps. Certainly, Toby, I totally appreciate you coming on and sharing your personal experience with us. Absolutely fabulous. It's been a great insight to us. And you're right, Gaz, you're right, Dave. Maybe we do need to look at this a little bit more. Dave and I have discussed, when we did the Tough to Talk episode, we sat and we had a very interesting evening there, and we said we want to do something that makes a difference with the podcast. Not necessarily this podcast, but a different podcast as a project. And I do believe that midlife crisis may be the way that we look at going forward. There's something that we can help people that I don't think, truthfully, there's enough out there helping people. And maybe that's something that we can look at in the future. I don't know. But, I'll tell you, like we do with Crime Watch used to do, don't have nightmares, folks. Go out there, enjoy your evening. We're live streaming again tomorrow night. We're talking to someone who's psychic, who's going to give us an in-depth into our minds that we probably don't want. But that's another matter for another episode. But, folks, we've talked about midlife crisis. We've talked about how life is short, and that is really, really important. Go out there, fulfill your dreams, and God love you. We're behind you, and we'll see you next time.